Do you feel that after everything you've done, your child ignores you, disrespects you, or worse, seems not to value you at all? That feeling of ingratitude can be devastating. You've given so much time, sacrifices, unconditional love, and yet what you receive in return is silence, indifference, or even reproach. You ask yourself, when did everything change? Why doesn't my child see me for who I am? This is a far more common problem than you might think, and it can create a deep emptiness in your heart. But let me tell you something. The real problem isn't just your child's attitude, but what that attitude is triggering within you. Frustration, resentment, a sense of failure. All those emotions are eating away at you little by little. However, there is a way out. In the teachings of Stoic philosophy, from thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, we find powerful answers to face these kinds of challenges. Through 7 profound lessons, you'll learn how to reclaim your inner peace, stop relying emotionally on your child's actions, and live with a serenity that no one can take away from you. My name is Gabriel, and if this is your first time here, I invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stick around until the end, because we're going to explore how to overcome this pain and take back control of your emotional life. Let's begin. Number 1. The poison of unmet expectations. Have you ever felt that your child should be more grateful? That after all the sacrifices, sleepless nights, worries, and effort, the least you expect is respect and appreciation. Yet, you're met with short replies, indifference, or even criticism. That pain of feeling unappreciated can be devastating because it's not just about your actions as a parent, but a part of your very identity. This is where Stoic philosophy offers a crucial lesson. The expectations we build, especially unspoken ones, are one of the greatest sources of suffering. Imagine for a moment that in everything you've done for your child, you unknowingly created an image of how they should reward you, with love, respect, time, maybe even support in old age. It's natural to want that, but the trouble comes when we turn these expectations into obligations. Seneca once said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectation, which depends on tomorrow and wastes today." Each time we bind ourselves to how we think things should be, we distance ourselves from the present and from what we truly can control. We hope our children will behave a certain way without accepting that they have their own paths, their own lives, and their own worldview, which might not match ours. When those expectations aren't met, it feels like something has been taken from us, as if our child's love and respect were a debt they would never repay. Epictetus's teaching on the dichotomy of control becomes invaluable here. There are things in life we cannot control, and other people's behavior is one of them. We cannot decide how our children will respond to us, what they'll think, or how they'll navigate their world. If we base our happiness on those expectations, we place our well-being in the hands of something that was never ours. As Epictetus said, if you want to be invincible, don't fight against what depends on others. So how can you break free from this cycle of unmet expectations? Start by reflecting on what part of your pain comes from unspoken, or worse, impossible expectations. Think of the times you've hoped your child would respond a certain way, thank you in a particular manner, or recognize your sacrifices as you feel they should. When these things don't happen, it feels like not just a personal letdown, but a failure of everything you represent as a parent. One clear example is Maria, a mother who always dreamed her son would visit her on weekends, call her to share his problems, and lean on her in difficult times. But her son chose a different path. He distanced himself emotionally, prioritized his career and personal relationships, and Maria was left waiting for a love that never arrived in the way she had imagined. Over time, resentment grew, and each time her son didn't respond as she expected, the wound deepened. But Maria decided to take a step back. She realized that her pain wasn't from her son's actions, but from the expectations she had placed on him. By accepting that she couldn't control how her son lived his life, she began to find peace in what she could control, her ability to enjoy the present, to value herself, and to stop waiting for something beyond her reach. This is the poison of unmet expectations. They destroy your inner peace. The only way to free yourself is to let go of rigid ideas about how things should be. Does this mean you should stop wanting your child's respect? No. It means letting go of the idea that this respect and gratitude must come in a specific way or at a specific time. A child's love can show up in ways you didn't foresee, and by releasing control over how it should arrive, you open yourself to appreciating it in subtler forms. Here lies the most important Stoic lesson: don't let what you can't control steal your peace. When you release the expectations that bind you, you'll realize that true freedom, true serenity, comes from accepting things as they are, not as you wish they were. Number 2, when love becomes emotional debt. As a mother, it's only natural to give your love and care unconditionally. From the day your child was born, every sacrifice, every effort, every decision was driven by a deep love. But over time, that love and sacrifice can sometimes morph into an unspoken expectation that your child owes you something in return. This becomes an emotional debt that, if left unchecked, can turn into a source of bitterness. When we devote our lives to raising, protecting, and caring for our children, it's easy to fall into the trap of expecting something back: respect, gratitude, attention. After all, you've given so much of yourself. Isn't it fair to get something in return? But here's the issue. Love that's given with the expectation of receiving something back isn't truly unconditional. It becomes an emotional debt that your child may sense, even if you never say it directly. This feeling of indebtedness can create resistance, discomfort, or even resentment, and instead of bringing you closer, it can push you further apart. This is where Stoic wisdom offers a liberating perspective. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do good willingly and without expecting any reward." True love, according to the Stoics, is given simply for the sake of love itself, without expecting anything in return. When we give and wait for something in exchange, we're creating a transactional relationship, not a genuine connection. Conditional love, even if it's implied, creates a pressure that eventually erupts. Consider Rosa's story. She poured everything into her children, sacrificing her time, her health, and her personal dreams for them. She expected that, once they reached adulthood, they would take care of her and support her, just as she had done for them. But her eldest son, Pedro, took a different path. He focused on his career, got married, and began dedicating more time to his new family. Rosa, though she never said it openly, began to feel that Pedro had abandoned her. She felt he owed her attention, visits, and a kind of relationship that never came. Over time, the relationship between Rosa and Pedro grew tense. Each time Pedro didn't visit, Rosa felt more hurt, and though she didn't express it openly, her resentment became evident in small comments. Pedro, in turn, began to avoid visiting, as each encounter left him feeling guilty. The emotional debt Rosa had unknowingly created was driving a wedge between mother and son. Stoic philosophy teaches us to be aware of our expectations and the traps they set in our relationships. Epictetus reminds us to act according to our values, but without depending on how others react. We can't control how our children perceive our sacrifices or if they will return that love in the way we expect. All we can control is how we relate to them from a place of genuine love without expecting compensation. When love turns into debt, It becomes an invisible chain that binds our children, making them feel they have to pay back something. This obligation, however subtle, pushes them away. Why? Because no one wants to feel forced to love, visit, or care for someone. Love that feels like a duty loses its essence and becomes a burden. So how do we break free from this dynamic? The key is to recognize that your sacrifices were your choice. Every decision you made, every effort you put in, you did out of love, not obligation. True love doesn't demand anything in return. When you can release the expectation of receiving something back, you free your child from that emotional debt, and you free yourself from resentment. This doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment or indifference. It means that your emotional well-being shouldn't depend on what you receive from others, but rather on the inner peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing because you chose to, not because you expected something in return. Seneca put it clearly, "The wise man is satisfied to do good without needing recognition." By letting go of the need for reward, you make room for a more genuine relationship with your child. Instead of a debt he feels he has to repay, he can choose to connect with you from a place of free, unforced love. In short, when love becomes emotional debt, both sides lose. But when you can give without expecting a return, love has the chance to grow in a more authentic and liberating way. Number 3, the root of disrespect lies in the lack of boundaries. It's a painful reality, but often the lack of respect or even love in a relationship between mother and child has an unexpected source: the absence of clear boundaries. As a mother, you may have given everything without conditions or restrictions because the instinct to protect and love unconditionally is powerful. But in the process, it's easy to forget that healthy relationships are built not only on love, but also on boundaries that allow both sides to respect each other. From the moment our children are born, we feel responsible for their well-being. We care for them, protect them, and make sacrifices for them, often putting our own needs aside. But over time, if we don't set boundaries, it's easy to fall into a pattern where our child comes to expect us always to be available, always ready to give more of ourselves, no matter the cost. Without realizing it, we teach them that it's acceptable to take, while we continue to give endlessly. Marcus Aurelius said, "Love everyone, but trust only the few who deserve it." This idea applies in family relationships too. Loving our children is natural, but it doesn't mean we should allow everything. Love doesn't mean we have to be an endless source of sacrifice, without respect or consideration in return. Without boundaries, love can turn into resentment, because unknowingly, we've allowed our children to take without learning to appreciate what they're given. A clear example is Carmen, a mother who was always available for her son. If he needed money, she provided it. If he needed a favor, she would drop everything to help. If he arrived at her home at any hour without notice, she would greet him with a smile. In her mind, she was acting out of love, building trust and closeness. But over time, her son began to assume that everything Carmen did was simply her duty. He never asked if she needed anything in return or if there were limits to what he could ask. And when at one point Carmen tried to say no, her son was offended, as if she were denying him a right. What happened here? Carmen had never established clear boundaries around what she was willing to do. With the best intentions, she fed a dynamic where her son took without learning to respect her sacrifices. When she tried to change things, the lack of boundaries led him to interpret it as a personal attack instead of seeing it as a natural need in any relationship. This is where the Stoic teaching on self-control and managing our own actions comes in. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And in our relationships with our children, it's often not about what they ask of us, but how we respond to those requests. saying no. Setting boundaries and remembering our own needs is not selfish. It's an act of self-love and respect for our own dignity. Boundaries not only protect your emotional well-being, but also teach your child to appreciate what you offer. When you set a boundary, you're saying, "I love you, but my well-being matters too. I can't be here unconditionally if it means neglecting myself." This act of setting boundaries is a reminder that every relationship needs balance and that mutual respect is essential to that balance. In Stoic philosophy, the concept of self-governance is fundamental. Marcus Aurelius teaches us that we must be in control of our actions and emotions, and we cannot allow others to manipulate or control us, even when those others are the people we love most. Setting boundaries is not a sign of detachment, but a way to take care of yourself so that you can keep loving from a healthier, more balanced place. When respect is lacking in a relationship between mother and child, it's often because boundaries haven't been clearly defined. As a mother, you may have given so much that your child has come to take it for granted. But now is the time to change that dynamic. Setting boundaries may be uncomfortable at first, but it's a way to teach your child to value what you offer. You're not an endless source of emotional resources, and your child needs to learn that there are times when they must respect your space, your decisions, and your well-being. A lack of boundaries opens the door to disrespect and disdain. By establishing them, you not only protect your inner peace, but also teach your child a valuable lesson. Love is given, but it is also respected. Mutual respect is rooted in the ability to recognize and honor each other's limits. And remember, as Epictetus said, freedom is the power to live as you wish. Setting boundaries gives you that freedom for both you and your child. If you're enjoying this video so far and feel you're discovering new ways to apply Stoic wisdom to better understand your relationship with your children and approach this stage of life with more peace and clarity, I invite you to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps me continue creating content that brings value to those who seek to live this phase with dignity and inner strength. Stay tuned until the end, because lesson number 7 could completely transform your perspective on the power of serenity and the true control you have over your emotional life. Let's continue. Number 4, stop seeking recognition from those who can't give it. One of the deepest pains a mother can feel often comes from waiting for a kind of recognition or gratitude that never arrives. You've given everything: love, sacrifices, time, even parts of yourself, hoping that one day your child will acknowledge all you've done. But what happens when that recognition never comes? When the words of thanks remain unspoken, or worse, seem to be entirely absent? This is where Stoic philosophy invites us to reflect on something crucial. Not everyone has the capacity to recognize what others do for them, and this isn't necessarily about whether they love you or not. It's about their own perspective, their own emotional limitations, or even their expectations of you. Epictetus reminds us, we cannot demand that others have the same priorities or perspectives as we do, and this lesson is essential when we confront the pain of feeling unappreciated. Often, children, whether due to their own personal challenges, emotional maturity, or simply the life they lead, can't give you the recognition you hope for. It's not that they don't love you, but their ability to see beyond their own concerns may be limited. From their perspective, what you do might seem normal or just what a mother is supposed to do, without recognizing the deep effort and love behind it. And here is where emotional conflict arises, when a mother seeks acknowledgement from someone who, for now, isn't in a position to give it. Take Teresa, for instance, a mother who supported her daughter, Sarah, every step of the way. Teresa helped pay for Sarah's college, cared for her grandchildren while Sarah worked, and was always there for any emergency. Yet despite all this, Teresa felt her daughter didn't appreciate what she did. Every favor, Every sacrifice seemed absorbed into the routine without a word of thanks from Sarah. Teresa's pain didn't stem so much from her daughter's actions as from the lack of acknowledgement. She felt her efforts were invisible. This kind of pain can erode the relationship between mother and child. When we spend too much time seeking gratitude or recognition from someone who can't offer it, we only feed resentment. The unspoken expectation that they should appreciate our sacrifices creates an invisible barrier that blocks genuine connection. But what can we do when that thank you never seems to come? Here, Stoic thought offers a key to freedom. Epictetus teaches that true recognition cannot come from outside. You cannot control what others think or feel about you, but you can control how you choose to perceive your own worth. Instead of waiting for others to validate your efforts, recognize the value of what you've done yourself. Knowing that you acted out of love, in line with your principles, is enough. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." If you keep looking for validation from your child, you sink into a spiral of frustration and pain. But if you decide that what you've done already has value, without the need for external acknowledgement, you set yourself free. This shift in perspective isn't easy, but it's essential for inner peace. Stopping the search for recognition from your child doesn't mean you stop loving them or that you resign yourself to a distant relationship. It means you give yourself permission to live in peace, without letting someone else's gratitude determine your emotional well-being. And sometimes, when we stop waiting for something, that's precisely when things begin to change. By letting go of the need for validation, you allow the relationship to ease and flow naturally without the pressure of unmet expectations. A powerful example of this freedom lies in Seneca himself, who said, "A wise man is content with doing what is right, without needing a reward." By ceasing to seek recognition from your child in the way you expect, you are taking control of your own satisfaction. You're choosing to act according to what's right for you, knowing that true recognition, the kind that matters, comes from your own ability to see yourself with compassion and respect. Let this liberate you. Your worth does not depend on your child's words. You can't control whether they recognize what you do, but you can control how you choose to feel about it. The most important recognition you can receive is your own. And once you stop seeking it from someone who isn't ready to give it, you can start finding peace within yourself. In short, letting go of the need for your child's recognition doesn't mean giving up on a relationship with them. It means freeing yourself from the emotional burden of expecting something that may never come. It means refocusing your energy on what you truly can control, your own well-being, and your capacity to continue loving unconditionally. By doing this, you not only find peace, but also leave space for recognition to perhaps come spontaneously when you least expect it. And if it doesn't, you'll know that it doesn't define your worth. Number 5, emotional independence is your greatest strength. One of the most important pillars for a fulfilling life, especially in family relationships, is developing emotional independence. Often, mothers place their emotional well-being in the hands of their children, unaware that this dependence, though well-intentioned, can become a source of suffering. Feeling that your happiness or peace depends on how your child treats you is a recipe for pain. But this is where Stoic wisdom can help you reclaim your inner strength. Stoic philosophy teaches us that true freedom isn't in what we possess or how others treat us, but in how we respond to what happens around us. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is not master of themselves." This principle is essential in the mother-child relationship because, often without realizing it, we hand over our inner peace to our children's actions or reactions. If they don't call, we feel lonely. If they don't appreciate us, we feel ignored. And with every action or inaction from our children, our emotional state is thrown off balance. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that happiness is directly connected to the behavior of those we love. After all, if we've given so much, shouldn't we receive something in return? But this expectation makes us dependent on what's outside our control. And as Stoicism teaches, what is outside our control should not rule our life. Emotional independence doesn't mean you stop loving or become indifferent toward others. It means that your peace and well-being don't depend on how your child behaves, but on how you choose to interpret their actions. You decide how to respond emotionally. Marcus Aurelius put it clearly: choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. This phrase isn't an invitation to indifference, but to inner strength. You can't control whether your child respects you, appreciates you, or shows love in the way you hope, but you can control how you allow that to affect you. True emotional independence begins when you recognize that your worth does not depend on what others think or do, but on your ability to remain calm in any situation. This strength grows from within, allowing you to live with greater freedom and less suffering. When you stop tying your emotions to your child's actions, you release a heavy burden and regain control over your well-being. A practical way to strengthen this emotional independence is by learning to live in the present. Seneca reminds us, the greatest obstacle to living is expectation, which depends on tomorrow and wastes today. If you're constantly waiting for your child to do or say something to make you feel better, you're missing the chance to enjoy what you already have today. Inner peace is not in what may come, but in how you choose to live this moment. So how can you apply this teaching in daily life? First, start by recognizing when you're handing your emotional power over to your child's actions. Do you feel hurt if they don't call? Are you pained if they don't act as you hoped? Every time you find yourself in that situation, remember, their behavior is beyond your control, but your reaction is entirely within your hands. Practice pausing for a moment and reflecting. Am I letting this affect me more than it should? The second step is to cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself. Spend time doing things that nurture you emotionally without relying on others. Reading, meditating, exercising, or simply enjoying a walk can help you focus on what's truly within your control, your own well-being. The stronger you become within, the less power external actions have over you. Lastly, remember that emotional independence doesn't mean isolation. You can continue to love your child deeply, but from a place where your happiness doesn't depend on each of their gestures. As Marcus Aurelius said, the soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. That is, your thoughts and perceptions determine how you feel. If you decide that your emotions won't depend on external factors, then you will be coloring your soul with peace, strength, and serenity. In short, emotional independence isn't just a tool for handling challenges with your child. It's a way of living that allows you to find peace within yourself. By freeing yourself from emotional dependence on what you cannot control, you give yourself the freedom to live more fully and with less reactivity. And that, without a doubt, is one of the greatest strengths you can cultivate. Number 6, the art of accepting what you cannot change. One of the greatest challenges as a mother is accepting that despite everything you've done for your child, there are aspects of their life and behavior that you simply cannot control. As a mother, your instinct to protect and guide leads you to want to shape their path, correct their mistakes, or ensure that their life is as full as possible. But here is where Stoic philosophy offers a fundamental lesson. Learning to accept what you cannot change is the key to serenity. Epictetus taught us that in life, there are things we control and things we do not. Your child's actions and decisions, their thoughts and behaviors are outside your control, No matter how much effort you put into helping, guiding, or advising them, ultimately their life belongs to them. This principle may sound harsh, but it's deeply liberating if understood and applied correctly. Marcus Aurelius expressed it simply but profoundly. Love what has been given to you by fate, for that is what you have, amor fati. In this case, what fate has given you is the need to accept that your child is an individual with their own free will, with their own path, and that they will not always do what you believe is best. Accepting this doesn't mean you agree with their decisions, but it means you acknowledge that fighting the inevitable will only bring suffering. Imagine for a moment that your relationship with your child is like trying to navigate a boat in the midst of a storm. You can't control the waves or the wind, but you can control how you steer. If you cling to the idea that you must change the course of the storm, you'll only experience frustration and pain. However, if you accept the circumstances, you'll be able to adjust your sails and navigate with greater calm. Stoicism offers us a valuable tool, the practice of premeditatio malorum, or the reflection on potential hardships. Instead of denying the challenges you face with your child, you acknowledge them and mentally face them before they happen. This practice prepares you to accept what you cannot change without falling into despair. By accepting in advance that your child won't always act as you hope, you free yourself from the trap of constant frustration. Stoic acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's not about giving up or ceasing to care. It's about shifting your focus. Instead of spending your energy trying to change your child, invest that energy in changing your perspective. Ask yourself, what can I do to improve my inner peace? How can I handle this situation in a way that doesn't depend on what my child does or doesn't do? Part of this acceptance involves recognizing that you cannot take responsibility for your child's decisions, even if you feel you could have done something differently in their upbringing. As a mother, it's easy to fall into guilt, thinking you could have said something better or made a different choice in the past. But Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You cannot rewrite the past or control the future, but you can choose how to respond to the present. A clear example of this Stoic acceptance is letting go of the insistence that your child show gratitude or respect if they do not do so naturally. Accepting that, for now, this isn't within their emotional capacity doesn't mean you settle for an unsatisfactory relationship. It means you stop fighting against a reality you cannot change at this moment. With time, the relationship may improve, but only if you stop imposing your expectations on it. The art of accepting what you cannot change frees you from unnecessary tension and suffering. By releasing the idea that your child must behave a certain way for you to feel at peace, you make room to find calm amid uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius also said, "The universe is change, life is opinion." Everything changes, including relationships. What you think today may not be what you think tomorrow, and what seems like an insurmountable problem today may look different tomorrow. In short, accepting what you cannot change is an act of wisdom and self-love. It frees you from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable and allows you to focus on what is truly within your power, your own inner peace. By practicing Stoic acceptance, you not only protect your emotional well-being, but also open yourself to the possibility of a more genuine, expectation-free relationship with your child. Number 7, choose serenity over resentment. We come to one of the most important lessons in any challenging relationship, especially between a mother and her child. The conscious decision to live in serenity rather than letting resentment take control. It isn't easy. When you feel ignored, misunderstood, or unappreciated by your child, resentment can arise almost naturally as a defense against emotional pain. But Stoicism offers a way out, a way to choose inner peace, even when external circumstances aren't what we wish. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." While this may sound simplistic at first, he is actually saying that emotional suffering doesn't come from what others do to us, but from how we interpret and react to those actions. If we let our children's words or indifference disturb our peace, we're giving them the power to determine our state of mind. Stoicism invites us to take back that control and to consciously decide how we want to feel. Resentment doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's the result of accumulating small frustrations, disappointments, and unmet expectations. Every time your child fails to act as you'd hoped, another layer of resentment builds. Over time, this feeling can turn into an emotional barrier that not only damages your relationship with them, but also prevents you from finding peace and satisfaction in your own life. The problem is, resentment doesn't punish those who don't value you. It consumes you, taking away the serenity you deserve. This is where we can apply the Stoic lesson of intentional serenity. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you that harms you, but how you allow it to affect you. This means that even if you can't change your child's behavior, you can choose how to respond to it. Instead of focusing on what they're not doing, on what you lack, or what you believe you deserve, you can choose to change your perspective. Resentment is an unnecessary burden, one only you can release. Imagine for a moment what would happen if you chose to let go of that weight, not because you're resigning yourself to a less than ideal relationship, but because you understand that your inner peace is more important than any external conflict. This act of letting go is a gesture of self-compassion and deeply liberating. It's not about settling for less, but about refusing to let others' actions dictate your happiness. A practical Stoic exercise is negative visualization, anticipating worst-case scenarios, not to become disheartened, but to prepare yourself emotionally. By imagining the possibility that your child might not change, that the respect you seek may not arrive, you can begin to let go of expectations and prepare to live with serenity no matter what. It's not resignation, it's active acceptance. As Seneca said, misfortune is not what happens, but how we bear it. Once you decide to let go of resentment, you can start enjoying the present without the shadow of unfulfilled expectations. Perhaps your child doesn't show the affection you'd hoped for, but you can still find value in other areas of your life. You can choose to focus on what you do have, your health, your friendships, your personal passions. Serenity arrives when you stop waiting for the world or your child to give you what you believe you're owed and begin to live fully with what you already have. This approach doesn't mean ignoring the challenges in the relationship, but rather shifting your focus to what truly is within your control, your attitude, your thoughts, and your reactions. And in doing so, you free your child from any emotional burden they might feel, possibly opening the door to a more relaxed, less strained relationship. At the end of the day, true emotional freedom doesn't come from changing others, but from changing your relationship with the expectations and emotions that arise from them. As Marcus Aurelius said, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. If you choose to think from a place of serenity rather than resentment, your life will be lighter, fuller, and less conditioned by what others do or don't do. In summary, choose serenity over resentment. This decision will not only transform your relationship with your child, but will give you the inner peace you've been searching for. Don't wait for others to change so you can feel at peace. Find peace within yourself, and everything else will fall into place in its own time. The relationship with our children, especially when we feel underappreciated, can be one of the most challenging tests of our lives. But remember, true love doesn't seek recognition or reward. Love, when it's rooted in serenity and acceptance, is the purest gift you can give. What matters most is not changing your child, but regaining your inner peace, releasing the expectations that bind you to suffering, and learning to live with calmness. Stoic wisdom teaches us that while we can't control how others treat us, we always have the power to choose how we respond. Emotional independence, acceptance, and serenity are the keys to a fulfilling life, even when the relationships we hold most dear aren't perfect. Your happiness doesn't depend on your child's actions, but on how you choose to interpret them and how you decide to live your life. Today, you've taken an important step toward that emotional freedom. You've reflected on topics that aren't always easy, but that hold the power to transform your life. Because in the end, what matters is not how much others change, but how much peace you're able to cultivate within yourself. My name is Gabriel, and if this is your first time on the channel, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the upcoming topics we'll be discussing. If you've made it this far, it means you take your personal growth seriously, and that deserves recognition. So, to know who is committed and made it to the end, comment the phrase, "I'm Stoic," and tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to hear from you and see who's joining me on this path of self-discovery. And don't leave without sharing this video with your loved ones. There may be someone in your life who needs to hear these words and find a new perspective today. Sometimes, a small piece of advice can make a big difference. See you in the next video.